Hi.
Hi.
Long time no see.
I know, it's been a bit.
Yeah, luckily nothing's changed in the world, so that's cute.
Yeah, everything's exactly the same.
Exactly as it was. Except there's a third person in the room. Can you see
That's
her?
the
Or is
only
Spectre.
difference in the entire world.
I'm just glad that you can also see her. And that
On November 12th, 2024, the only difference is in the entire world is that our podcast has a special guest.
yes. Otherwise, all is well.
Yeah.
Dang.
For sure.
Yeah. Should we introduce ourselves and then our guest? Okay. I'm Mia Schachter. I'm a writer, artist, consent educator, intimacy coordinator. My pronouns are they, them. I have a cat on my lap. I'm the twink half of this podcast.
Okay, I'm Risden. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a consent educator and intimacy coordinator. I'm in school to be a sex therapist. I'm the horror part of this podcast.
I'd like to add, Risden, I want everyone to know that you look really pretty today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's important.
Thank you. Yeah, I did it for you. Because there's only so many things I can control, and one of them is overlining my lips. Which actually I can't even really control that well, but we're trying. And our special guest, Kelly Albrecht.
Yes.
Who's
I am the specter haunting Europe, apparently.
Yes. Okay, tell us about you.
Okay, my name is Kelly Albrecht, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a clinical psychotherapist and a social worker, and I specialize in trauma comorbid with neurodivergence.
Incredible. That's actually amazing. Kelly's actually not my therapist. Kelly,
although the other way around.
You should be. Kelly's my sponsee in 12-step because she took a burning desire in a really big meeting and I ambushed her and was like, you're mine and you're never leaving me.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Another way to potentially describe that is that a portal opened that we both had to walk through at the same time. It's another way you could maybe describe it.
And now I see why Risden wanted us to meet, Kelly.
Kelly has a really interesting story that I didn't know about when I first started working with her that I feel like is really relevant to what's been coming up for you a lot, Mia, with just this sort of like how like online lefty spaces eat their own, and it actually ends up in like less discourse, silencing, and people like taking a step back from movement work because there's so much policing going on.
Yeah, I think I've noticed both like personally and professionally a shift for myself. You know, I was writing a lot and talking a lot about cancel culture and how insidious I think it is for quite a while before this summer when my book deal got canceled by someone who emailed my editor. And now what I've found is like the more like initially when I started talking about these things, I was really afraid of the backlash that I was going to get, and that I thought a lot of people would like leave my page and would, you know, call me Clementine Morgan as like a derogatory
I was
thing.
like, isn't that a compliment?
Yeah, I mean, I have been called like by her name in the past, and like, you know, just been like, okay. But anyway, I thought there would be a lot of backlash. There was a small amount of backlash, but for the most part, I've been really surprised that it seems to be like eliciting sort of the most emotional and enthusiastic response from people. Like I posted about my book getting canceled on Substack, and someone was like, the exact same thing happened to me. And, wow. You know, and told me this whole story about what happened to her. And then someone else responded to a post I made on Instagram, a mother of a teen who was like, I'm in tears writing to you. Thank you so much for like speaking so bravely about this. Like my kid got canceled at I'm assuming at school. Like I don't know the story, but she was like, any resources, like it's so painful. So like those are the kinds of reactions that I've been getting. And I work primarily with artists now. A year or two ago, I started like moving my work to sort of focus on working with artists and using consent as a practice with yourself and your creativity. And what I've found again and again is that eventually almost everybody hits this wall where they're afraid to be public with their work, to share it, to speak about it, and to put themselves out there, whether it's creatively or professionally, because of a fear of cancellation. So I've started to see how people are like, they're not asking for what they want. They're keeping themselves really small. They're not even trying to like find their voice, because why would you do that if you're not going to use it? And it's like, it's preventing people from like finding their purpose or like living their purpose. It's preventing people from like making their art. And ultimately, I think it's like really, really hurting the world and the left in a really big way.
Mm-hmm.
I want to we've hopefully fixed our sound issue, and Risden now looks like a hot twitcher.
Yeah.
I'm drunk on that compliment. Can you tell?
Oh my God, good. I like when my compliments hit.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess Kelly, do you want to talk about what you were doing on Twitter before I met
Yes.
you?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had this weird side quest from like 2019 to 2022 of being in the Twitter leftist space. Like somewhere, if you're really deep in this culture, dear listener, it would be somewhere in the corner of like dirtbag shit posters on the left and like dialectical materialists on the left. So where that intersection was is where I lived, right? So I started utilizing it to build a community of other socialists. And then it kind of turned into, during lockdowns, when that's all I was doing all day, it turned into a support channel for people who were protesting on the ground. And me and my classmate in my MSW program, he's very like tech savvy and just like a tinkerer. So he's like, I'm gonna get a police scanner. And I was like, word, let's do it. And then he like figured out a way for it to run constantly, but we also had to like recruit and scale, right? So we recruited through our friends, but also people that I was meeting on Twitter and then vetting. And so essentially, we set up this network of people who multiple people had police scanners, but we're also using TALs. Um, and it
What's
eventually,
that?
what's that?
A tall?
Oh, sorry, my friend's name was Tall. I should
Oh,
have introduced him.
I thought it was an acronym for something technical that was about
Yeah.
to understand.
Ooh,
Yeah.
did it sound like really confident
did.
when I dropped that
It
acronym?
did. We were like,
Okay.
God, Kelly's so smart. Yeah.
No, if Tall's listening, I'll probably send this to him. Tall Metaboy. He is also a therapist. He specializes in OCD, and I love him dearly.
Mm.
I would kill a coyote for him, as Lauren Muto would say. Um, so yeah, we set up police scanners. We had like a network of people listening and taking shifts essentially while we were all in lockdown, bored, and many of us like drinking our lives away. At least we're on the police scanners and then like shooting kind of heads ups to people on the ground. So it started like that. And then from there, I built a mutual aid network to get money and resources to people who were living under the bridge along 18th Street in downtown Los Angeles. Because just to give you a little bit of context about like, I don't know, the landscape of homelessness in this part of Los Angeles, there is Skid Row, as many people know. where people are really high acuity, high needs, and therefore they are eligible for services. But if you're a little bit lower needs and higher functioning, oftentimes you'll live outside of the periphery, or you'll be on the periphery of Skid Row, and there's a lapse in services and resources, right? So I kind of built upon this network I had built doing the police scanning with Tall, and I was like, I want to actually like pivot this also into mutual aid efforts. And so we started crowdsourcing money, and I did like my hot girl dance to get, people to donate on Twitter, and started channeling those resources into those encampments that I described along 18th Street. And so that was the utilization. And then like also my own, you know, desire to build like a socialist network, or connect myself to already established socialist networks in Los Angeles. And then there was also this like ego thing, and I can like get into that later, but I think I liked the clout of social media because like of course it's designed to be addictive in that way as well. So one thing that I think is important to note about Twitter, and people who have worked at Twitter, like ethicists that have worked at the company, have talked about how Twitter's algorithm is designed to really capture and promote outrage. And so that was one thing that I saw as an immediate threat in any type of organizing on Twitter, for example, because people were really rewarded for starting fights, making outrageous claims, or saying something very inflammatory, right? So that is very antithetical to like what we were trying to do, which is like genuinely solidarity building. And so that was like an immediate threat, and was very quickly a threat to my own mental health too, because I was pretty constantly hypervigilant or nervous about getting like attacked or getting into some sort of fight. And I would see these like big kind of implosions of groups that were doing groundwork, or, whatever work it was, because of what, and I, hate to evoke the specter of Clementine Morrigan here, but what she has called wreckerism, and I think it's a really good word for it. There are people that are coming into these spaces who are really like high on the dogma of leftism, like this neoliberal element of leftism that's very like authoritarian, and it's very righteous. And people who maybe are vulnerable, who are really, really hungry for control in their lives, maybe they're feeling out of control in other ways, are vulnerable to this like outrage algorithm. And so they're able to wield social justice language that you would see on the left in bad faith ways to like seek control over other people, or simply to wreck because they were looking for ruin, they wanted to be ruinous, which is interesting. But what I saw is that drove people away, obviously, because people see this as like threatening and scary, which I share in that feeling. And so people would be driven away, or people would be exiled in this like very strange display of cancellation. And anyone who wasn't on the canceling side would also be ultimately exiled. It was very like rigid in this way. And it was absolutely ruinous to my mental health. I have to say, like, I haven't been canceled yet, like, knock on wood, but like the time comes for us all, right? But
when, yeah.
Yeah, so I was using a lot of substances to cope with my work at the time. I was working in architecture. It was very stressful, but also, coping, trying to do this work while also like being, I don't know, feeling safe, which drove me to use as well. And so when I got clean and sober in 2021, I started to really pull back. from
Mm.
social media. And then ultimately I nuked my Twitter, meaning like I completely deleted it permanently, maybe 6 to 9 months after that.
Do you think because you didn't have the tools of drugs and alcohol to like regulate your nervous system, that perhaps without those tools, doing social media was like too dysregulating?
Exactly. Yes, exactly right.
I also wondered, you mentioned that it's addictive, and it's, social media is designed to be addictive.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if it was like, noticing how, these particular substances were impacting you and then stopping using them. Like if it also just felt like, well, this is another drug.
Yes, perfectly said. Yes. And that's been this dissonance that I've been kind of wrestling with in the time since I've gotten clean from like, substances that you consume. Um, I guess you consume social media, but it's not a substance. I don't know. How do we classify that? We can table that and figure it out later. But yes, it does feel like this continuation, like I'm dopamine seeking. I am powerless over this thing. My behaviors around social media feel entirely out of my control at this point in my life. And so I am not on any of it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And has that affected the mutual aid work that you were
Yeah,
doing previously?
I no longer do it.
Yeah. I feel like that's a huge loss, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
because of this substantiated fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not an imagined fear. Like you witness it happening.
Yeah.
And so in an act of self-preservation, you get off social media, but then the work isn't happening. Like it just
Yeah,
so
that's right.
directly, it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It does suck. I've been like grieving that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I have considered so many times just like not doing the work that I do anymore because of the repercussions of like, pedestalization and social media and um the ways that people want access to me and think they know me,
Right.
and hold me to this like just absolutely absurd standard, as a consent educator. I'm sure you experience this as a therapist, like the symbolic exemplar
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon. And I mean, there are things that I have already stopped doing, not so much because of cancel culture, but like, I think about people who've asked me for payment plans and then like not paid me, and the way that
Mm,
that has like changed how I'm willing to engage with people on payment plans. And it's like, if you act in bad faith and then I find new boundaries that I wish I didn't have to have,
mm,
or, rules that I have to put in place that like negatively impact other people, I still have someone who owes me like $1,700 and like they're
yeah.
never gonna pay me, and it's it's wild to me too. Like that person is such a great example of this because like they are also a coach and an educator and like had complained to me in one-on-one sessions about people not paying them.
Wow.
And so I think about, the way that plays out in cancellation, where it's like, have you never made a mistake? Like, how do you want people treating you when you make a mistake? Or like often, cancellation is happening like without even without mistakes. Like everyone makes mistakes, no one's
Yeah.
perfect. And I think often this happens where mistakes have not been made. In fact, we just
Yes.
disagree. We have like
Mm-hmm.
different values or different strategies of achieving those values. I may just simply not be the right person for you to learn from or to be friends with or to collaborate with or whatever. And instead of being able to just go like, I disagree, or this post isn't for me, there's a way that a lot of people, yeah, like flip into that control mode where they're like, well, my way is the only way. And if you're doing it a
Yes.
different way, then I need to get rid of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you shouldn't be a voice in this conversation.
Yeah. And I want to say too, as you're describing this, I also behaved in this way.
So did
Like
I.
when I was a part of this growing kind of like Twitter following that I had, and I was getting to know people, I was also behaving in this way
Yeah.
online. And I have so much shame and embarrassment, honestly, around my
Mm-hmm.
behavior of this time. And I'm still working through that, like in my own therapeutic journey, but that didn't make me feel good at all. It made me feel terrible and insane. And quite frankly, like this is a jump scare, but abusive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've written a bit about that too, and like, had to dish out my own fair share of apologies.
Hmm.
Um, because I feel for me it was like a lot around disability and chronic illness and gender stuff. Where like if,
Hmm.
no one was ever doing enough to support me or to educate themselves or to make sure that I was safe.
Hmm.
And my reaction to that was to be controlling and to lobby accusations.
Hmm.
This is transphobic, this is ableist, like this is exclusionary. And when I discovered, I doubt Kelly knows this, but some of our listeners do. I discovered after 2.5 years of like illness relapse that it wasn't a relapse at all. It was an entirely new issue, which was that I had a tapeworm.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So like as I've healed from that, um, I can see like fully the mental illness that being sick was causing for me. That it
Yeah.
exacerbated OCD. I think it probably, I mean, it certainly gave me some traits that I think would fall into like BPD. I was never diagnosed, and I don't know if I would have been diagnosed, but like there definitely were, a lot of binary thinking, a lot of like
Yes.
vilification and, yeah, putting people on pedestals and then they fall and it feels like a betrayal. And I was seeing this all happen to me in my position and critiquing it and like
Hmm.
trying as I was going to like notice the ways that I was also perpetuating that. But now with some distance from like the severe illness, I can see with a bit more clarity, like just how pervasive that behavior really was.
Yeah. Great catch. And that must be like such a head trip to like think back retrospectively on how your head state was so differently. And like it's really interesting you saying this because I was also dealing with, so I have rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease that
Mm-hmm.
can complicate other illnesses or infections. And so I've had a really, really hard time with COVID every time I've gotten it. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I was getting really, really, I also agree, like I was in the depth of mental illness through substance use, but also through long COVID. I was experiencing long
Mm-hmm.
COVID and then throw in a pregnancy loss in the midst of
Mm.
all of it and like probably not wanting to feel that pain. Or one thing one of my friends says a lot is like people with ulcers want to give other people ulcers kind of thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's really interesting now that I've had some distance to look back upon that and think I really feel like I was out of my mind.
I was fully out of my mind. I mean,
You're Go ahead, Mia.
well, I I just heard myself say I was fully out of my mind. And I just want to kind of check myself because I think I've been really, really hard on myself and held
Hmm.
myself retroactively to like that same absurd standard that I
Great catch.
don't want other people to hold me to and wouldn't hold anyone else to. And
Yeah.
like, and then I also, Risden, like, I'm thinking about, you found me during that time and like we became friends and like I couldn't have been totally out of my mind or like the people in my life wouldn't have, like I don't think I was handling it quite as poorly as I think in
Mm.
hindsight, but there is a lot of like just embarrassment for, I don't know. I had a particular friend, and Risden, you know about this, who like very dogmatic, very self-righteous. She knows the right way to do all the things, and anyone not doing them her way is wrong. you know, you can't go here, you can't go there, you can't talk to this person, you can't say these words, or we can't be friends type of thing. And like, I can see how, you know, even that behavior is really, you know, if you're not clear in your values and if you're not clear in your sense of self, you might encounter someone like that and it's really enticing. You know, like there's like, oh, I can just do what this person's saying and then I'll be good.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. That also makes me think of like how there's also this, and this is a controversial take. There's a lot of people on the left, especially in that corner that I was in, that I
Uh-huh.
mentioned, who really want authoritative governance. Like they
Yes.
want a dictator,
Isn't that
genuinely,
funny?
like
I
with
know.
their full ass. And it's interesting. It's like, how does that psychologically serve you? Is it because you need an authority? Does it turn you on? Like, what is that for you? I find it so
Daddy.
interesting.
Protect me,
Daddy.
daddy. Yeah,
It's
there's
a
Yeah.
sub thing.
yeah, well, and both of you were talking about a time where like you were literally under attack by a foreign body or your own bodies. Like,
Hmm.
so your
Yes.
sense for safety became like your need for safety became, I don't like hyper aroused or something. I don't know. So
Yes.
it makes hyper vigilant like just like a really intense, because you were that the level of safety you needed was really, really high, and you were both living
Yes.
in extremely unsafe times. Like, and so I think there is like, yeah, this desire, this false desire that like I can make the world the way I want it to be, which is the safe way, but it doesn't. And it's a
Yes.
little, I don't know if I'm quite right here, but it's like, and I'm not taking away from where you both were, because I think it's a logical jump when you're sick to feel this way, but like, is it infantile? Because to me, the desire for
Hmm.
like this paternalistic father, like not to get too Jungian, but like, yeah, it feels a little like protect me, save me, rescue
Think
me,
for me.
keep me
Think for
safe.
me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes. I think
Like an
so too.
yeah.
It feels like, yeah, in many ways for me, it felt like an age regression. Like
Hmm.
I was behaving interpersonally in ways that I can most accurately compare to like middle school behavior and then sorority behavior.
I was gonna
Mm-hmm.
say puberty. I've called it a kind of puberty in the
Yeah.
past. Like when someone is either first radicalized or first comes out or first diagnosed or yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's a
makes
great way of
sense
phrasing it.
because your amygdala is like totally dominating your brain, right? And
Yep.
you need that twinship thing so badly. Like you need to see yourself and everybody else. So if somebody isn't reflecting your experience, then they're not part of the tribe, right? And you're out, you're not in the group. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is very adolescent.
it is.
Hmm.
In a way that also was like, this is interesting to go down this like line of inquiry because in a way I think that was like I was trying to heal my inner child in some ways because I felt very rejected by my peers because of my
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergence in adolescence. And so this was a way for me to feel accepted by my peers and important to them.
Yeah, it makes, I feel like a lot of us on the left have always felt, I mean, a lot of us were not the cool kids in high school. You know what I mean? So like there's this thing of like, oh my God, I finally have community. And so you're
Mm,
so rabidly vicious at anyone who's like a false, you know, like a wolf in sheep's clothing or whatever you
right.
perceive them to be. You're not a
Hmm.
true believer.
Right.
Right.
Right. Which is, I need to point out, like antithetical to mass movement building. That
Mm-hmm.
is a direct threat to solidarity building,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah. I think about it a lot with like queer like in queer community where people are like, if your friends and family like don't accept you, then like your collateral is like access to you. And so you should cut them off. And
Hmm.
like obviously that is a legitimate choice in instances of like abuse or,
Hmm.
you know, a last resort after trying various other things. But I feel like the way that we've been told to do that, and then that becomes so like that's just like what we reach for. It sort of becomes like the path of least resistance in a lot of ways for a lot of people, because you get to bypass setting boundaries, working through conflict, having difficult conversations, you know, doing the internal work to even be able to like meet someone where they're at, even as they're dealing with something about you, you know, like if
Yes.
you're, and it's like, it's your queerness or transness or whatever. And so like, yeah, obviously it's more challenging for you, but it doesn't mean that they're not also dealing with something, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, whether it's like I find this to be so absurd and weird, but it seems to be a reality, so we have to contend with it, that like a lot of parents of trans kids like feel a lot of grief and loss around like losing their daughter in air quotes, and like now it's their son or whatever. And it's like, you know, for years I was like, that's so stupid, like your kid's going through something really serious, what do you mean you lost your, it doesn't make any sense to me. But now I'm a little bit more along the lines of like, well, a lot of people are saying that they're experiencing this, so like it's at least real to them. And it's obviously not the kid's problem, but like the kid can then, you know, find where they're willing to meet their parents at, and then set those boundaries and have those conversations. And also like each of us then has to be willing to like, if we're going to prioritize connection, then we have to be willing to like expand our tolerance for activation and find a little bit more patience. But if the narrative is cut them off, like if your peers or even the people that you admire, like your elders, you know, if your trans and queer elders are saying to you, cut these people out of your life, and then your only community and support system is going to be people you've known for 6 months, you know, like you're creating a really bad environment for yourself to like to grow.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like this has... Oh no, please, Kelly, you go ahead. You go.
I was just thinking of elements of internal family systems model, which is often referred to in short as IFS, where we actually push ourselves, and this is pulling on like other modalities like dialectical behavioral therapy and just like dialectics in general, where we're kind of forcing ourselves with to contend with things that maybe are offensive or disgusting to us in good faith. And so when you're talking about parents, like you said, who are like experiencing grief around losing what they believe to be their daughter during their transition, if we say you cannot feel that, they're going to be trapped there. And that will create tension between them and their child, their very vulnerable child who needs as much support as possible. And I think if we actually work with those parents on processing their emotions and moving through them, they're actually going to be able to show up for their child in a better way because they haven't been like suppressing or exiling these types of feelings. And that can be really hard for us if we are experienced in binary thinking. It feels very unsafe. It feels unsavory. So yeah, I was just thinking about elements of like no bad parts where we have to enter into problem solving, into negotiation. We have to enter into conflict resolution. We can't just bypass them all and say, sorry.
Yeah.
Get out of here. You know, it's like this continuous exiling behavior. And you're right, it is sometimes appropriate. Like I would be remiss to say, but I think that should be a last resort and we should learn the conflict resolution skills first.
Yeah, and seek out support. I mean, like a therapist or, you know,
Yeah.
whatever it is that you need. I really like what you're saying. It's reminding me of something that my therapist said to me recently, where like, you know, we've talked extensively about like my fear of cancellation. And it's funny, I gotta say, one of the best ways to move through your fear of cancellation is to get canceled, shockingly enough. But what I was saying was, I was like, this was a month or two ago. I was like, I really want to move. It was the Jewish New Year. So I was like, I really want to move into this new year, like without fear of creating. I want to leave my fear behind. And you know, and my anxiety so that I can like continue to do my work. And she was like, well, hang on a second. Are we exiling fear? Are we banishing, are we canceling fear? Like, how do you work with the fear and get to know the fear so that you're not just like perpetuating the same cycle? And that was like, that was really eye-opening for me.
I love that your therapist challenged you in that way.
She's great.
I've had a therapist too who she evoked this image of like a table, or sometimes I get really fancy with it because I love mid-century design. And I think of like one of those sunken couches, like a pit couch. And so I invite all of my parts into like this pit couch in my mind's eye. And the parts that are maybe historically exiled, I have to be especially welcoming and compassionate and curious with them.
Yeah, you have to direct text those people and be like, you are invited. Like they don't
You
get
are
the
invited.
joke. You specifically are invited. Yeah.
And I have to make amends to them.
I feel like there's a larger conversation too here about like, you know, with this last election and just the fact that it's like, wow, there's so many people that should be involved in the movement and aren't. And it's like, yeah, like this, like Kelly, what you said, like movement building involves working with people you don't like. Like, I just feel like, I mean, yeah, like I just think about white women. Like white women love Taylor Swift and Stanley Cups, and we got to figure out a way to get them on our side, dude. It's like, do you know what I mean? Or like disenfranchised lower class white men, like they want the same things that a lot of people on the left want, and it's just, but we're not reaching them because there's such an othering of like,
yes,
you can't be involved in this unless you play like this.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this is funny to say, I've been thinking about men a lot.
Bummer.
No, I mean, I think it's funny to say because it's not like it's recent. It's like something that, you know, I've done work with men for years, but you know, particularly in the wake of this election, I guess, and how like there's this, you know, especially within white feminism, I'd say, there's a lot of like, you know, lack of patience or empathy or care towards men who are feeling disenfranchised, white men who are feeling disenfranchised and deprioritized and all this stuff. And the attitude is like, well, you know, this has been your world forever, so get over it and take a back seat.
Buck up.
Right, buck up. Like, it's not your time anymore. Shut up. And like, that's, you know, and then there's like not any empathy for like, that's like the top, you know, demographic of like suicide. And and I feel like that's, you know, it's similar to what I was saying about like the parents struggling with a child's transition. It's like, you can think that's a dumb take that that these guys have, but it's a real experience that they're having. So like, if we just try to ignore that that's an experience that they're having, then we're going to create, you know, these guys on Twitter who are like, I don't need permission to get my girlfriend pregnant.
Right.
And I feel like, you know, then these guys and their feelings are getting banished from the space, and it's okay not to center them. But I do think we have to be willing to work with them and these feelings, especially because they still do have a lot of power because of their identity. To like, for us to work together, we then harness that power instead of sending it over to the other side where they're just going to feel empowered to do whatever the fuck they want and not consider anybody else in the matter.
Yes, exactly. That is some mass movement building mindset right there. I love to hear it.
Yeah, I don't know. I find myself very much averse to like activist and organizing spaces. I appreciate that other people do that work, and I'm a much more like behind the scenes you know, I know that I'm like making an impact in my immediate community and beyond. And then like those people can take this work into organizing spaces. But I'm just so tired of like the way that these things take place in these, you know, in these movements, that I'm just like, I'm just going to make art. I'm going to help other people make
Right.
art. And like,
Yeah.
that's my form of activism.
Because
love
of
it.
the wreckerism, that Mia, that's part of why you've sort of stepped back.
Yeah, I mean, I was never an organizer, and I was never excited about being like an on the ground activist protesting in the form of like being a body in a mass. Has like, you know, I've done it. I think it's important, but it's like not my personal form of protest. I think I'm protesting every day from my couch, you know, in the ways that I am teaching and writing and putting out podcasts and whatever. But yeah, I've stayed away, and then even like people have called me an activist, and I've started to really be like, I don't really want that label.
Yeah, that doesn't resonate.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. I still really desire being a body in the mass. I really like the way that you described that, because that is where I'm most comfortable. I really enjoyed doing that, you know, physically and also behind the scenes when I was organizing or running the police scanner group, right? And then also working on like a street medicine team in Skid Row. And so now I'm trying to like re-envision what being a body in the mass could be for me. And so I'm in this kind of, yeah, this sort of like planning era where I'm doing direct work with clients in this trauma practice and trying to explore a new city that I'm living in and get to know people, both in like directly socialist spaces, in recovery spaces, and just like in general. But I haven't quite figured out how to re-enter into activism, I guess. I also kind of cringe for some reason because I have this fear of it coming across as self-important. I don't know. That's just me. But all that to say, I don't know how to get there, but I want back in.
Wisdom, what's that face? Is
Someone
there a
just
sound?
walked into my backyard. I have no idea.
Hmm.
Oh no.
Weird.
Anyway.
Yeah, you know, I'm thinking just about social media and like, does Kelly know the story about Gigi Hadid?
I don't know.
Okay, so last year, shortly after October 7th, I made a post that was like, I thought really straightforward and obvious about how like there's nothing Jewish about what Israel's doing in Palestine, and like critiquing the Israeli government is not anti-Semitic. And Gigi Hadid reshared the post. And then the Israeli government reshared the post, like their Instagram reshared the post, and like coming for Gigi, being like, this is anti-Semitic. And then it was like all over the news, all over TikTok, all over Instagram. People were like talking about how Gigi Hadid reshared this post, and then the Israeli government, like blah blah blah. And then spyware was installed on my phone and my computer, and I had to like install extra security. Anyway, and like go to the Apple store and get a new phone. It was such an ordeal. But anyway, I had set up such strong tech boundaries for myself on social media, where I had comments off on every post on my page unless you went back years. I only allowed DMs from people who already follow me, even as a request. So like if people who don't follow me try to DM me, they just can't do it. And it was so locked down to the point that it took me 3 days to even know that this had happened. Like it wasn't until a friend called me, and then I started getting Google alerts with my name from like Rolling Stone, Variety, like, you know, The Cut, like all these places that were citing me, that I discovered that this had even happened. And like, what was amazing about that was like, I know I was going to I would have gotten like death threats, rape threats, like, you know, I was already scared. You know, I left my apartment when I got the phone call from my friend, and I like saw a van slow down in front of my apartment. And I was like, oh my God, am I about to get like put into a van? You know, like I had no idea. I was like, should I stay at my apartment? Should I leave my apartment? Should I turn off my phone? Are my pets safe? Like, you know, and then, but had my account been open, like I would have actually had people like threatening to kill me.
Right.
I have no doubt about that. Yeah. And also like anti-Semitism, which I had already experienced like in 2020. I got comments about my nose from like people who were like literal Nazis with swastika tattoos, like on Instagram. And you know, yeah, other anti-Semitic shit. So I was like so well protected that I didn't even know that this was happening. So I do think that there's like ways to engage in social media where you are really protected. And then like what's super interesting about that to me is that there was someone who left my life about a year prior to that, specifically because of my stance on cancel culture, and that I turned off comments on my page, and that I said, like, if you DM me or email me saying that I need to unfollow so-and-so because of something, I'm going to block you.
Yes.
You know, and this person who was a colleague and a friend had tried numerous times to like share their perspective, and even sent me at one point like another white creator's like code of ethics, basically suggesting that like that they agreed with this and that like I should be following this. You know, they had told me that they didn't like my tone on social media when I was like asking for people to sort of, you know, that like it's your turn to, I need some reciprocity here, like this is a free account, please subscribe, and things like that. And it's interesting, especially because this person was a therapist and a burnout coach, like specialized in burnout. So all the things, I know, so all the things that I was doing to like protect my mental health and make my work sustainable for me, like they were taking issue with. And I eventually got an email saying I no longer want a personal or professional relationship with you. And I just, you know, it was one of those moments where I was sort of like, wow, like people are simply not going to like recognize their own hypocrisy. I'm sure I'm also not recognizing my own hypocrisy. I don't think that these accusations of hypocrisy are working, right? Like we can say to JD Vance, you know, why are you like against abortion, but then you don't want to pay for public services, healthcare, and school? How can you say you're for free speech, but you want to ban drag? Like it doesn't work, you know, like people just go like, well, it's because of this, this, and this, and this. So, and you know, and I do even recognize a lot of places where I'm hypocritical, and some of those places make me go, oh, I think I need to then like adjust because this is hypocritical. And then other places I'm like, okay, it's hypocritical, you know?
It's human nature. It's impossible to not be hypocritical. It's going to be a part of all of us.
I eat red meat and I have an electric car and I compost. Hypocrite. Like, who cares? You know? Yeah. Like, okay. Anyway, that's all to say, like, it's interesting to me that there was like someone who was like, you know, turning off comments is preventing feedback, and like, I no longer want a relationship with you. And then fast forward, and like, it literally, all of those same boundaries are literally what protected me from like death threats and anti-Semitism.
Yes.
So I'm like really thankful that I put them in place. But you know, then it's also like a totally legitimate choice to just be like, fuck this, I'm getting off social media entirely.
Yeah. For me now, it's because I can't control my behaviors as far as like time spent on social media. I'm powerless over social media, where if I get back on Instagram, I will be on it compulsively for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Whoa.
Yeah. So my behaviors around it are very bingy, and I want to be free from that. And so I'm trying right now to figure out how to do this without social media.
Yeah.
90s
Yeah.
style.
90s style, which it's pushed me to like I joined like Meetup. Have you guys ever heard of Meetup?
Yes,
Mhm.
vintage.
I've been like going to meetups and I've met 2 lesbian climate scientists, which is like an ideal friend for me. If you could like ask AI to make an ideal friend for me, that's who they would be.
Yeah.
So it's going well.
Kelly is like one of the most lesbian adjacent people I've ever met.
Yeah.
It evidenced in part by our relationship, but yeah, very funny.
Exactly.
That's funny,
Yeah.
Riston. I mean, yeah, lesbian adjacent. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm also lesbian adjacent, but what?
I'm like riding in a sidecar.
Yeah.
You're at the Dyke Day parade, you're handing out water bottles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm like in
Yeah.
a little sidecar. I have a matching helmet and I'm handing out water bottles.
Right. I recently, like, my partner described me as sapphic, and I was like, whoa, I do not identify as sapphic. And I think I like overreacted, and he thought he had like offended me. But I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not a lesbian. No, like I'm queer. I date all kinds of people, but I'm just like definitely not a lesbian.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I am also not a lesbian for listeners. I date men and I am genderqueer. So I think that might be
Yeah,
why I just, I grew up in Missouri. And so
they don't have lesbians in Missouri.
they do.
No, I'm
And so as a
kidding.
kid, I would find the lesbians or like this. I told Tristan this, but I would find like the scariest bitch in school, and that would be my friend. And
So you found the scariest bitch in AA.
I
So
just
yeah.
that's a behavior that's never failed me.
Mm-hmm.
It's never failed me. Why would I stop now?
Why?
Oh God.
Mia, you have to dip,
Oh, I
right?
said,
It's that
oh
time.
yeah,
You
it
got a
is.
dip. This was so fun.
Oh
This is
yeah.
cute.
Thank you for
Ugh,
coming, Kelly. Nice to
Thank
meet
you for
you.
having me. Yeah,
Kelly,
I
I'm
would
so
love to.
obsessed with you.
I'm so obsessed with you. I want to hang out more.
I know. I'm glad you were here. We got to
Yeah.
chat.
I'm gonna go
Yeah,
on a hot girl walk.
Okay, cute. I love you
nice.
both.
Love you.
Oh,
Bye.
Bye.
bye.